This whole world is governed by laws and principles. And in this video, I want to show you three principles that you can use to make greater progress in your life. The first principle is that momentum is greater than the principle of desire. See, the most preeminent, the greatest principle is the one that prevails. For example, if someone's sick and another person's healthy, the sick person is more likely to make the healthy person sick than the healthy person to make the sick person healthy because that principle, their sickness, is greater than the other person's health. In the same way, the principle of momentum is greater than the principle of desire. If I'm on social media and I scroll on Instagram, scrolling, well, eventually, as I scroll, momentum takes over and object in motion remains in motion unless acted upon by outside force. So I'm scrolling and I'm going to keep going because momentum is going to take over. So my desire may be to get off social media and to do something else, but I'm going to keep scrolling because the momentum is greater than desire unless acted upon by outside force. And the outside force is your awareness. You become aware there's been like 20 minutes on social media. And because that awareness, which is also greater than momentum, you're going to get off social media and do what you desire. So how can we use this to make greater progress in our life? Well, we have to understand and become aware of when momentum is leading us astray. I was doing door-to-door sales this summer, and obviously you get a lot of no's. People are like, get off my lawn and stuff. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I'm knocking on doors and I get a no. Okay, that's cool. I knock on another one, get another no. Okay, that's okay. And I keep getting no after no after no. Well, over time, momentum is going to take over, and I'm not going to put my all into the next door because I already got so many no's. But when an object in motion or when the outside force comes of my awareness, and I say, okay, that no was the last door. I'm still going to put my all into this next door so I maybe get a sale. That's going to take over so that my desire is to get a sale. I can act in accordance with that desire. So just use your awareness to understand momentum in the wrong way. And guess what? By doing that, you can actually have momentum in a positive direction. As I get a no, but I have more awareness to say, okay, I'm going to keep going. Well, that is not going to take over. So they're going to have more positive responses, and momentum leads me in the right way. The second principle to make progress in your life is that your beliefs are a greater principle over your ability. If you have the right mindset but no ability, you're going to play in accordance with your capability. But if you have the ability with no mindset, your performance will always fall to the level of that poor belief. This happened to me with basketball. I played basketball in high school all 4 years, and I practiced a ton. I had the work ethic to get me to play professionally somewhere. I had that type of work ethic, but because of my mindset, I always played in accordance with my poor beliefs rather than my abilities. In fact, I barely played basketball this summer, and I went to the gym, and when I was shooting, after barely playing, because I now have a greater mindset than I did in high school, I told my dad, I was like, Dad, I'm sorry. I should have played D1 basketball. I should play basketball collegiately somewhere because I had the ability without the mindset. And guess what? When you have the mindset, now you can take advantage of the ability you now have. How so? Well, if I believe I'm going to play good, I'm actually going to play in accordance with my capabilities and not just my abilities in the present moment. I love an example of Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant, he tore his Achilles and he still shot the two free throws. So his ability in that moment was he couldn't move. He can't walk. If you have a torn Achilles, you can't walk. However, because he had the right mindset, he played in accordance with his capabilities and was able to finish that play. In the same way, when we understand how important mindset is, we're going to get better results in our life. But what is mindset? In fact, I talked about mindset with someone 2 days ago, and we're talking. He's like, yeah, mindset is so important. And then I asked him a question that few people choose to ask. I said, okay, how would you define mindset? And he did not know the answer. He didn't know the answer. And it took a while to find out, okay, maybe it's your thoughts and maximize your thoughts and stuff. I was like, yeah, that's right. Because mindset is the way you think, the pattern of your thoughts. But I find that kind of weird how someone can be able to talk about mindset and talk about potential and growth and results, but not understand what those words mean. So how am I supposed to communicate effectively with that person? And this happened with another person I asked earlier this week. I said, hey, could you make yourself believe that making $100,000 in a day is easier than making $100,000 in a year? And the person said no. that they couldn't make themselves believe that. And that's how so many people are. They don't understand that we can actually change our beliefs. We don't have to be stuck with the beliefs that we're programmed or given to from an early age, because that's where a lot of beliefs actually come from. They're given to us from society. They're given to us from our parents. They're given to us from how we socially fit in with everyone else. And we just believe those beliefs are ours when they're actually not. I love what Alex Hormozi said, paraphrase. He said, if you can't explain why you believe what you believe, it's not your belief, it's someone else's. And by living out that belief, guess what? You're not living out the interpretations of other people's thinking instead of thinking on your own. And that subconsciously may get you to have action that isn't 100% towards the outcome you desire. See, if you're not sure your beliefs are true, you're not going to want to put your all into them. But if you do your own research, you do your own thinking and find out, hey, this is what I truly believe, well, now you're more likely to have action in accordance with that belief. And that goes back to mindset, which I said is the pattern of your thoughts. It's what you continually think about. It's not just a moment of thought, it's your lifestyle. Like the Bible talks about this. It talks about how Noah walked with God. It was his lifestyle. In 1 John, walk with God, live like that, lifestyle. The same way your mindset is how you walk with your thoughts. So how can we develop a greater mindset? We do it by taking advantage of our mental state. Mental state is the environment of your mind, what thoughts you allow in and what thoughts you choose to take out. See, we all know that environment dictates self-control. Better environment, better self-control. For example, if I have a fridge and there's unhealthy foods like cakes and ice cream in the fridge, well, I'm going to be tempted by it because it's in my environment. However, if I remove those foods from my fridge, well, I'm not going to be tempted by it. Why? Because when there's no opportunity to do wrong, doing right now becomes default. And it's the same way with your mind, the mental state that you have. When you remove all your negative thoughts or your self-limiting beliefs, well, now all you have is positive beliefs, positive thoughts, and you're going to act in accordance with them, and they'll get you greater results. And that is how you take advantage of the ability you may have. See, basketball, again, I practiced enough to where I believe I could play collegiately. However, because of my mindset, because I had a bad environment in my mind, self-limiting beliefs, well, now I didn't have that type of results. And it's because of what I asked the other person. Can you change your belief? Can you get yourself to believe this? And she said no. But the answer is yes, because a belief is considering something as true. It's accepting something to be true. And another principle in beliefs is that it doesn't matter how much faith you have if you have it in the wrong thing. If I truly believe that this chair is going to save me from hell, well, I can believe that with all my might, but it's not going to actually save me. But if I have just a little bit of faith in Jesus Christ, well, he's able to save me, and he can use that faith to give me the outcome I desire. So the principle is that we should search out what to believe in. And then when we find out what to believe in, if it's solid, it's going to help us, even if we barely accept it as true. And that leads to the third principle to make progress in your life. And that's that consistency is greater than reputation. See, if I'm going to be in a boxing match with someone in 2 weeks, and let's say this person is like Mike Tyson. I mean, he won like every match he ever played. The betting odds are all in his favor. Everyone believes he's going to win. Well, because of that reputation, it seems like I'm going to lose. However, if Mike Tyson, a hypothetical person, is not going to work out, he's not going to put in any effort for the next 2 weeks, he's just going to eat ice cream and cake and be unhealthy, have a poor mental state. Well, I, on the other hand, am going to be consistent every day, getting better, improving my mindset. Well, that consistency is going to prevail over reputation, because reputation alone doesn't get you results for the future. It just shows what you probably have done in the past. The only way to get better results in the future is making sure you're consistent in the present. Why? Because of another law, and that's the law of entropy. Things tend to disorder. See, every time you're not getting better, every time you're not growing, you're by law decaying, because nothing stays the same, since entropy comes in and destroys the progress you made in the past. So if you're relying upon your reputation, but you're not going to do anything to improve on it, well, by law, every single moment, you're going to have a worse reputation. But you choose to be consistent, that consistency, even if you don't have the reputation, will eventually get you the reputation, and in the future, it gets you better results than relying upon reputation alone. So the question now is, how can we become consistent? And the first way is by taking control of your emotional state, which is the emotions that you have. See, an emotion is an automatic reaction. You can't always control it. Now, your feeling is your awareness of that reaction. So, if you had the emotion anger rise up, well, your feeling is you become aware that I feel angry, I feel frustrated. That's your feeling. Now, your expression is what you choose to do in response to that feeling. Do you choose to act badly and inconsistently, or do you choose to forgive the person who wronged you, or do you choose to have a positive response? And that's how you build consistency, taking control of that by becoming aware. So, how can we make sure we have positive expressions all the time? Because that'll get us better results. See, positivity, it doesn't guarantee the outcome you desire, but it will guarantee that you're on the path to getting that outcome more than negative thinking does. So, how can we have positive responses? We do it by having momentum in our favor and by mastering our mindset. See, as we have one positive response that pushes our momentum in a positive way, making it easier to consistently respond in that way. And we have the right mindset that we take away the negative thoughts in our mind and place them in positive, is more likely we're going to act in alignment with those thoughts that leads to more momentum. And over time, guess what? We become the type of person who responds in that way, and it makes it more our default response. Because when I become, for example, a healthy person, it's more likely I act in alignment with that identity and eat healthy foods than someone who sees themselves as an unhealthy person. And that's how you build trust within yourself. See, trust is the certainty that comes from believing evidence. The more evidence you have to believe about something, the more you're going to trust that thing. That's why it's so important, if you're a Christian, to read God's word, to read the Bible. Why? Because you're going to understand more about who God is and what he has done. And as you look at that, you build evidence that he is trustworthy, that he's a God who can't lie, not just does not lie, not just should not lie, but he cannot lie. And understanding what he's done in the past, it builds evidence that he's going to do that in the future. That's one way to trust him more. And it's the same way with our lives. Why? Because every principle applies to every area of life. So that's why I love the scriptures, because the scriptures are full of principles. And when you understand those principles, you can apply them to math. You can apply them to other areas of life like basketball, relationships. Is going to apply because principles always work. So the principle of trusting yourself, when you build evidence that you are reliable, when you build evidence that you can do something, you're going to trust yourself more and have more confidence. It goes back to me with basketball. I had so much evidence based upon the work that I put in that I was capable of being good at basketball. And when I focus on the evidence, I tend to believe it more. And again, trust is the certainty that comes from believing evidence. So as I believe that evidence, I have more certainty, I have more trust in myself, and that gives me better results as I have a new identity and act in alignment with that identity and have more consistency, which eventually gives me the reputation I may or may not have in that moment. Those are three principles to make progress in your life. When you take advantage of momentum, take advantage of your mindset, and you build consistency, you're going to get better results than relying solely upon desire or your ability or your reputation. Thank you guys for watching. Also, my goal is to become a speaker. If you are in the state of Georgia and you have any speaking opportunities, I'd love to talk with you. You can DM me at austin_inspiration.daily. And I'd love to speak about mindset or principles or religion. I'd love to speak for you. So make sure to DM me then. And thank you guys for watching.